AP Films was formed in 1957 by 29-year-old Gerry Anderson and his friend and colleague Arthur Provis.
I decided that I would get together with some friends and form our own production company.
I set up AP Films with Gerry because we had a promise to make 52 episodes of Twizzle.
Along came a woman by the name of Roberta Lee, and under her arm she had 52 15-minute scripts. And she said, "Would you like to shoot this series?" And we said, yes. I mean, we didn't even stop to think. And then she said, yes, they're children's shows and they've got to be made using puppets. At which point I nearly vomited on the floor.
To begin with, the scripts were impossible. We had to rewrite them because of the limits of puppets. I mean, they can't do anything. And if anybody tells you that they can walk, forget it, they can't.
In mid-1957, armed with their first commission, AP Films took their first offices in Maidenhead, at an imposing mansion called Islet Park.
Islet Park was in Maidenhead, and it was just by the river.
It was a bit like sometime in the 1920s or the 1930s, there'd been a wild party at the place, and everybody died, and nobody bothered to pick up their cars or anything. And it had just, a bit like Miss Havisham's wedding feast, it was left.
I contacted a puppeteer, and she came along with this papier-mâché puppet, very rough face, eyes were painted on, mouth was painted on, didn't open, and it had thick carpet thread to control the puppets. And she said, okay, well, here's what you do. You get a sheet of hardboard, I stand behind it, and on the hardboard you paint a little scene like a garden, say, a few props, you know, fork, spade, couple of flower pots, and I lean over the top and I perform with the puppet and you film it. Well, of course, I mean, I couldn't see how we could make a television series like that. I came up with the idea of putting the puppeteers overhead.
Puppeteers work from what's called a bridge. It was made of Dexian. Puppets were worked from this bridge, and there were little stages with the scenery on, 2 feet from the actual ground.
Roberta Lee asked us to make another series that she had created. This time it was Torchy the Battery Boy.
Hello, Moon Man.
Don't hello me. Get out of my bed and let me climb in.
You can't go to sleep during the day.
I was thinking all the time, if I make really good puppet films, the broadcasters or the financiers are going to say, listen, this guy's wasting his time. Let's give him a live action show. So guess what happened? They said, hey, this guy makes great puppet films, let's give him some more.
Four Feather Falls.
In Four Feather Falls, Four Feather Falls, there's always magic in the air.
Welcome to Four Feather Falls, the friendly western town that's full of fun and excitement. And here's the sheriff, Tex Tucker.
Howdy, folks. I'd like you to meet my horse, Sir Rocky, here.
Awfully pleased to meet you.
He's a thoroughbred, you see. And my other pal, Dusty.
Hiya, folks. Yes, they can talk, thanks to these magic feathers.
When we finished with Roberta Lee, we made our very first independent production. We had made not a lot of money, but enough to make a pilot film.
Barry Gray, the composer, had this idea for a cowboy series, and told Gerry about it, and they decided that they would like to make it. They shot the pilot for Four Feather Falls at Islet Park, and then that, of course, was sold to Granada. And when Granada decided to buy it, that's when, you know, we realised that it would be better to move to a bigger studio.
In the summer of 1959, AP Films packed up and left their home at Islet Park to relocate to the less glamorous surroundings of the Slough trading estate.
We hired a number of stars of that time. One was Michael Holliday, who was a singer and a sort of Bing Crosby sound-alike. We had a black and white combined print which we put in a 200-foot film can, put the top on, taped it up and posted it to Granada. And then back would come, about a week later, a payment for it. There was never any comment on the productions. And we made all those episodes, and not once did we hear from Granada whether they were happy or not happy. And when we sent the last episode through, I expected to receive a letter which would say, "Jolly good chaps, you know, everybody's very pleased, thank you. And next we would like you to make..." I never heard from Granada again until many, many years later.
Lou Grade was one of television's first moguls. In the late 1950s, he bought what was to become a successful ITV franchise. On the verge of bankruptcy, Gerry arranged a meeting with Lou.
We were going to go into voluntary liquidation. And a friend of ours called Frank Green came in, and we told him that we were going bust. And he said, "I mean, you can't do this, Gerry. I mean, look, you know, you've got a control room here. You actually built it with your own hands, and you've got your overhead bridges for the puppets, and you've got a projector and BP and all this sort of thing." And he said, "I can't bear the thought of you closing down." He said, "I've got a friend called Connery Chappell, and he knows Lou Grade."
And Gerry went to see Lou Grade and said, "We want to do this series about a machine called Supercar." And Lou Grade said, "Oh yes, how much will it cost?" Understandably.
So I said to him, "We've budgeted out and it'll cost £3,000 an episode." And he exploded. I mean, frightened the life out of him. He said, £3,000 an episode? I can't afford to pay you that. This is for a kids series. What are you talking about? So he said, he looked at me and he could see that he'd, shaken me, and I was really quite frightened. And so he became very nice, and he's Uncle Lou now. And he said, "Look, Gerry, if you go back to your studio, he said, 5 o'clock now, if you come and see me tomorrow morning at 7:30 and tell me that you cut the budget in half, I'll give you an immediate contract for 26 pictures."
Well, Gerry sat down with his calculator, I suppose, and his pencil and paper, and came up with a figure which was only a third less than he'd offered to Lou Grade. Instead of a half, you could only reduce it by a third.
I could actually feel my eyes welling with tears. And I said, "Mr. Grade, I've been up all night and we've tried desperately." I said, "We've cut a third off the budget, but there's no way we could cut it in half."
So Lou Grade sort of got up from his chair and went up to a door and said, "Just a minute," and went through into what Gerry took to be another room, and came back a few seconds later and said, "Okay, you got yourself a series."
And he just said, "Okay, you got a series." Just like that.
It transpired later that Gerry, in fact, discovered that what the room that Lou Grade went into was not another office, an accountant's office or something. It was, in fact, a cupboard.
So I turned back and said, "Mr. Grade, is it possible for you to let me have a letter of intent?" And then again he exploded. He said, "A letter of intent? My word is better than any contract or agreement you could ever get drawn up. Now get out of here and make the series."
And with Supercar came a new trademark, filmed in Supermarionation.
Supercar, Supercar.